Welcome to the program tonight. Normally I start off with a true crime murder mystery. You know, that's what we do. And you usually tune in at 10 o'clock for that. And thank you for that. I'm going to start a little different tonight because when I was a kid, like even in high school, right? Like even 14, when I was 14, if I did something wrong, I was told, go to your room. Go to your room. And I remember thinking that was awful because I would be in my room probably for an hour, staring at those four walls and thinking I was going to go out of my mind for 1 hour in that room. Go to your room was awful. But there's a 14-year-old kid tonight that if the police are right, and he shot up his high school at 14 and killed two kids who were also 14 and two teachers, and they're going to try him as an adult, there's going to be a command to go to your room if he's guilty of it. But it will be a cell, and it won't be an hour, okay? It's not going to be an hour. It's going to be 74 years. Just think about this for a minute. Go to your room. Go to your cell. Because if you kill 4 people and you're charged as an adult, you go away for life, no parole. And if you live to 90, let's just say, and he's 14, 76. 76 years. Go to your room. 76 years of being in your room, staring at those walls. It's the thing that crossed my mind today when yet another headline like this crossed the television set. If he's convicted, and it seems as though he gave up, school resource officer reportedly got him to just surrender. He's in custody, and they say he's charged with murder, and they are going to try him as an adult. And I highly doubt things are going to go well. Everything's usually on video, right? We're in schools now. There are witnesses everywhere. 76 years. Go to your room. I'm just wondering if someone else is going to be punished too. Because there's a report tonight that the FBI had this kid on their radar last year when he was 13. Anonymous tips said to the FBI, there's some online threats that there's going to be a school shooting, and they tracked it. They tracked it to Georgia. They tracked it to Winder, Georgia, where this happened. And they tracked it to his house. And then the FBI said to the local sheriff, it's up to you. You got to go knock on that door. You got to go to Winder in your county, and you got to knock on that door where that 13-year-old last year lives. You got to ask some questions. And they asked questions. They asked the dad, you got any guns? Because the online threats had pictures of hunting rifles and stuff. And the dad said, I have hunting rifles. But this kid of mine, 13, he doesn't have unsupervised access to the guns. I guess they asked whatever else they could, but determined there's no probable cause for any further action. Way back a year ago when all these other people weren't shot and were still alive. So a year ago, the authorities were at this house asking questions of that dad, asking questions of that kid. Found out we don't have enough to go on. Can't do anything. So you know what they did? They alerted the schools. They just alerted the schools. You know, keep your eyes on this one. That's all they could do. You know, it's the beginning of school. Kids have been back for like a week or 2 or 3, you know. Who knows if that message is even like disseminated around all those teachers tonight. I don't know. But that's all they could do, apparently, is just alert the schools. And now 2 students, 2 teachers dead in Georgia rampage. Look at the bottom of your screen. Here we go again. Here we go again. I want to bring in Bobby Chacon. He's a retired special FBI agent. He usually helps me to navigate through some of the stuff I just don't know, don't understand, or he lets me know that I'm not crazy. But tonight, I'm going crazy. And I want to ask you a couple questions, Bobby. For starters, how does that work? How on earth does an actual anonymous tip come into the FBI? It gets passed down to the local sheriff. They go to the house. They interview. And they can't do anything. How does that work?
Well, first of all, he wasn't on the FBI's radar. We didn't know who he was. We referred this down to the Jackson County Sheriff. They actually identified this kid last year. We didn't know who he was. We referred as much information as we could through the anonymous tips. We said, this is coming from your jurisdiction. Wherever this online activity is, these threats that these anonymous tipsters are sending in, it's coming from your jurisdiction. We can tell you that based on the data that we're getting through the computers. Jackson County Sheriff then identified this individual. Then they took investigative action, as they should. They went and they interviewed the father, as you said, as you very aptly described the investigative activity. They determined through, I would imagine, talks with their prosecuting office, what they had, and there wasn't enough to charge him with a crime. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to, has a crime been committed? If it hasn't, then there's no action to be taken other than to tell the school, you need to keep an eye on this kid. You need to have more engagement in him, whether it be with a guidance counselor, with a school psychologist, however the school is set up to do that. Absent a crime being committed, that's all that authorities can do. You want to change the...
Okay, hold on. You put out threats online, and in my books, a crime has been committed. This is why I'm in such disconnect right now. It happened, they found it, they sourced it, they visited it, and determined nothing to see here because, of course, what are people going to say? I didn't do it. They found it. Tell me where I'm wrong here.
Well, how that usually works is you do the investigative steps, and then we would take it to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal prosecutor. Jackson County might take it to their county prosecutor's office and says, this is what we have. Will you charge this person with a crime? The FBI doesn't charge anybody with a crime. The U.S. Attorney's Office charges them with a crime, and we assist with the prosecution. So it depends on the local prosecutor's office if a case was presented to them. I don't know if Jackson County presented any evidence to their prosecutor's office and said, we want a large file charges against this kid. The FBI didn't do that because I'm certain that this was a local matter that, if the FBI thought that these threats arose to a federal violation, they would have presented it to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta for potential decisions on prosecution.
Okay. Good. Okay, so let me stop you there because I'm following this bouncing ball, and all I can think of is these FBI officers who found this material. They did their due diligence. They tracked where the signal was coming from. They give it to the local authorities, and then they hear nothing to see here. And it's frustrating me because my first question was going to be, does that drive FBI agents nuts when they hear that, or are there so many of these going across their desks they can't possibly feel that way? And B, why didn't they take it further? If the locals didn't do anything, why didn't the FBI take it to the U.S. Attorney?
Well, that would be my question. And that was my question as well, too, when I started thinking about this. Let's see how many threats like this they get per day, per week, per month. I mean, I think we heard that there was a report today that there were 5 threats to 5 shootings at 5 different schools, this one being the first one today. So, it would depend on how many of these threats come in. You could be drinking from a fire hose if that's the case. I would like to see the aggregate number of these threats and how much you can follow up on each one. If there's just an inordinate amount of these threats coming in, you do what you can. You parse it down to the local authorities, let them take it while you're dealing with the next set of threats that came in that night or the next day.
Well, here's the thing. When you get 5 a day, are 4 of them so obviously ridiculous, or are 5 of them all a concern, all equally serious, all difficult to track? Like, what's the status of the dirty fire hose that the FBI is trying to deal with when it comes to school shootings?
Well, there's a number of indicators. The details of the threat, you look into the person's background, like when Jackson County had identified this individual, did he have any prior problems at school? Did he have any prior threats? Did he have any fights? You try to do a deep dive into the person's background to see if these are credible threats, because like you said, there are so many of these threats coming in online. It's thousands a day, might possibly. And so you have to have some kind of triage to see what we can further look at and who could potentially be a real threat. Unfortunately, some of this stuff we only know when we go back and look at it in retrospect in a situation like this. But yes, I think that you need to know the aggregate number of these threats that come in to see if this one was handled properly or not.
Again, we got 4 dead, we got 9 hurt. But, we keep watching that because sometimes, and actually sadly a lot of times, the numbers tick up as people are in the hospital trying to survive the carnage that they've, just been through. Bobby Chacon, really appreciate you, doing this for me. I was so angry when it happened, and I got so much more angry when I found out that he'd already, been spoken to. And I guess, spoken to, we now know is certainly not enough. Bobby, thank you. I want to bring in Dave Ehrenberg right now. He is the state attorney for Palm Beach County in Florida. Get me off the ledge here. What is probable cause if what they had wasn't probable cause back a year ago?
Actually, it's disturbing because probable cause is a low standard. It's just used to make an arrest that you've got some evidence that shows that this person is a threat, and it looks like they did. I mean, you have someone who apparently posted some images and was tied to this young man. I guess he was 13 years old at the time. Now he's 14. And they went and interviewed the father, and the father said, no, he's got no access to these guns. But I would submit that if you've made threats, and those are the guns in the pictures, that some action should be taken. Notably, Georgia has some of the weakest gun laws in the country. So for other states, like in Florida, you could file for a risk protection order, otherwise known as a red flag law. That would allow law enforcement to be able to confiscate the weapons in the house temporarily if you can show to a judge that someone poses a significant risk to himself or others. Well, that would have been another option here. Instead of making an arrest, take away the guns. But Georgia doesn't have that law, and they didn't make an arrest, and so here we are.
I just don't get it because, I haven't met many criminals who, when you interview them at first, say, yes, I did it. They usually say, wasn't me. And for this kid to apparently, according to the reports, to have said to these sheriff's deputies, I didn't do it, and that was enough, I'm just completely dumbfounded by that. They had the online evidence. They had the pictures. They had guns in the home. They had the dad. Let's talk about the dad, Dave Ehrenberg. Let's talk about the dad for a hot minute. Because in Ethan Crumbley's case, his parents are both serving time for not having done enough to stop their troubled boy from doing what he did in his school shooting. They both got charged. They're both serving time. Do you see a potential here? And I get it. We don't have a lot of details yet. But what we have with this dad who tells these, responding law enforcement officers, nothing to see here. He has no unsupervised access to weapons.
Based on what we know now, Ashleigh, there would not be a charge against the father. The state of Georgia does not have a law on the books that requires a parent to lock up a gun and keep it away from a child. So because you don't have that law, then it's extremely unlikely he'll be charged with anything else like involuntary manslaughter. The Crumbley parents, they enabled their kid by buying their kid a gun, and then when they were warned repeatedly that he was a ticking time bomb, they laughed it off. And then when the kid was at school drawing horrific pictures, they refused to take him home or even check his backpack. So that was an unusual case. It doesn't really have a lot of precedential value because it was so egregious. Here, based on what we know now, you've got a father who said, no, he has no access to the guns. These are hunting guns. And that really means that he probably won't be charged unless he bought him the guns. He knew he had the guns. He was so negligent that he really enabled this to happen. But we don't know any of that at present time.
We don't. And I'll tell you what, we don't know. I heard the interviews being done live on the scene today where they asked, what about the weapon? What kind of weapon? And, I kind of am conditioned to hear it's an AR-15, but the officers who were, giving out the public information said, we're not going to disseminate that information yet. And I just wonder if there is a match, Dave, if there is a match, and these are the dad's guns, and he told those officers a year ago he doesn't have any access to those guns, does that change the metric? Is the dad exposed?
Not in Georgia because there's no law that requires them to be locked up. Now, if he handed the kid a gun, if he left it sitting in his room, in the child's room, and made it so easy for him to get it, then we could talk about involuntary manslaughter. But in the absence of those facts, no, the fact that the kid somehow found the gun and took it and then used it at school is not enough in the state of Georgia to charge the parent with a crime. But the investigation continues, and maybe we'll find out more evidence that this is another case of bad parenting, because the Crumbley case in Michigan stands alone. It's unique, and we don't see that here yet.
I think I want to clarify here with my producer. I just think I just heard that it was, in fact, an AR-15 style weapon that was used. Again, I don't know if the weapons that the father said he called them hunting weapons, but loads of people use AR-15s to hunt wild boars, etc., and pigs, etc. So I don't know if there'll be a match on those weapons, but I'll be keenly interested to find out, where the case goes from here. I just want one more question, and that's how I started the show, Dave. 14 years old, tried as an adult, quadruple murder so far, right? That's the allegation. That is, in my books, that's life, no parole. That's toe tag parole. You come out of the prison only when you have a tag on your toe. And for a 14-year-old, that is roughly 76 years. Where am I wrong?
You're not wrong. There are rules in place to enable a young person like this to get hearings in the future for parole to see if they've been rehabilitated. But now, this is the kind of horrific crime that'll send you to prison for life. And young people are not eligible for the death penalty, but they can, in certain circumstances, get life in prison. And you do not want this child to be tried as a juvenile, because then he'll get out of jail probably around the age of 21, and that doesn't help anyone. So yes, he's going to be tried as an adult. He's going to get a life sentence. Maybe one day he gets out on parole if he's a different person, but that day won't happen for a long time.
I can't see, honestly, not after all the trials that we've been seeing in kids who've been locked away for life. I can't see parole happening. And it's hard to say that when you're talking about a 14-year-old. Their brains aren't fully formed, but God damn it, did they ever destroy people around them? Not only the dead, but the living. Everybody is destroyed by these kids. It's just another awful, awful story. Dave Ehrenberg, thank you for the wisdom and the information. We'll keep watching it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Okay. If there's one thing that I have learned in this business, it is that victims will often find a way to be heard, even if they have to say something from beyond the grave. And in Sandra Birchmore's case, text messages told her story, even when the medical examiner couldn't or wouldn't. The floodgates really opened up when the feds changed her suicide to a homicide. But the tsunami, that started when they unlocked the vault on the text messages. The messages between Sandra and her cop boyfriend, what they sent back and forth right up until she was killed. You are about to see all the secret conversations, and buckle up. It is not pretty. So I opened the show with a school shooting, right? Not a true crime mystery that we usually do. It was a breaking news story. We had some breaking news tonight. The FBI apparently knew that kid a year ago, had a threat, followed it up, sent the officers from the local jurisdiction to talk to his dad and him, and didn't have enough probable cause to do anything. So here we are today. But there's a whole other set of dangers out there that we need to think about. And I want to bring you to a completely different kind of danger right now. It's a danger that our kids and our teenagers face every time they leave the house, not just to school. When they leave the house, there are predatory grown-ups all over the place. In particularly, I want to talk about the predatory authority figures, people in uniform, for instance, with badges and a whole police department to back them up. That is the danger that allegedly killed Sandra Birchmore after wrecking almost half of her young life. Sandra actually had multiple predators and abusers, at least 3. But only one is locked up tonight in a Massachusetts jail cell and charged with murdering her. His name, as you probably well know by now, Matthew Farwell. That's him. He's a former detective with the Stoughton, Massachusetts Police Department. And he's a former instructor at that police academy's Explorers program, the thing for teenagers, who want to be cops maybe one day. Matthew Farwell won't ever be a cop again, at least in Massachusetts, and likely anywhere. And if the shocking and frankly nauseating allegations in an FBI affidavit are actually proven out, He's going to die, locked in a federal cell. For now, the so-called grooming that ended in murder, the secrets and threats and obsession with underage girls, all of that is unproven in court, but it may be very, very hard to deny. Because allegedly they are all revealed in text messages to and from Detective Matthew Farwell and his teenage mistress, who became his alleged murder victim. Those messages reveal, and the feds allege, that Farwell took Sandra's virginity on a school day when she was just 15 and below the legal age of consent in that state. At the time, he was 27 and married. He allegedly groomed Sandra since she was as young as 12, maybe 13. That was when she joined the Explorers program. And their sexual relationship lasted the rest of her life. But it was a very short life because she died at 23 years old, 8 weeks pregnant with Matthew Farwell's child. And just days after she died, Matthew Farwell was questioned by Massachusetts state troopers about his relationship with Sandra. I just want you to think for a minute. Just imagine, how nervous he must have been, given that the police have the text messages that they say showed he'd been having regular sex with her since she was just a kid, 15. Nervous or not, he told the troopers their illicit relationship had just begun the previous year when she was 22. And despite being married with 3 kids at home, he said that he'd had sex with Sandra only 2 or 3 times that year. That was it. And that he only went to her apartment on the night that she died to end it. It being the relationship, not Sandra's life, according to him. And that story might have actually prevailed. Sandra's death might still be listed as a suicide, if not for those pesky text messages that the feds got a hold of, and then that the feds laid out in a 45-page document for you and me to read. And those text messages allegedly show that Matthew Farwell, Detective Farwell, had groomed Sandra from the age of 13, raped her at 15, and used and abused her for years after that, all while married with kids at home. October 5th, 2020, 4 months before she was murdered, Birchmore, Sandra, discovered that Farwell's wife was pregnant. Her cop boyfriend's wife was pregnant with child number 3. So she gave Matthew Farwell an ultimatum: have sex with her without a condom to impregnate her so that she too could have a baby, like his wife. Or she would tell that wife that they'd been having secret sex for years. I want to read a couple of their texts. Just 1 week later, on October the 12th, Matthew Farwell said, I said the agreement was once. That was our compromise. Sandra Birchmore says, I asked if we could try this month. Didn't realize that meant you F me once, LOL. And then I asked if we could try through this year. And you said, I'd think about it. Detective Farwell says, our compromise was try once. And Birchmore says, yeah, it was to try this month. So you're thinking about the second thing I said as far as the rest of the year? Farwell said, you said try once this month. If it happens, it's meant to be. Those are the exact words. And sure enough, on December 28th, Birchmore tells Farwell that she too is pregnant, just like his wife. And she includes a poster right there. Take a look at that. She made that by hand. It says, congratulations, we are going to be parents, 2021. Wow. Wonder how that landed with him. So here are the texts that followed. How far are you? Sandra says, regardless of how far, we're keeping it. But 3.5 weeks, which means I conceived this month. Okay, well, we need to talk then, he says. And then Sandra says, no shit, that's obvious. And then she says, and the birth certificate is being signed, or hers isn't. And that's presumably referring to Farwell's third baby with his wife. And Sandra continues, No, I'm mad you're acting how you are over a choice we both made. And Farwell lashes back, I'm mad you act like you gave anyone a choice. And Sandra says, LMAO, laughing my ass off. Oh, so you didn't have a choice? And she waits, and then she sends a question mark. She's not getting a response. And he says, per usual, you make and do whatever you want. And then Birchmore says, all I did was say, can I have it? You said, have what? And I said, you know what I'm asking for. And you stood up and said, yeah. Birchmore continues, you've been doing that. You mad she's due in February and I'm in September, and you don't know how you're going to be there for both of us. Birchmore continues, and you need to be there during labor for me too, because your kid should matter. Late August, early September. And Farwell responds to that, you are truly the worst person on the face of the earth. Wow. After that, Sandra Birchmore threatens to expose Farwell, and Farwell responds with this. For the past week and a half, the doctor wasn't right, but now she was. And you just throw it at me, because now you've got me. You honestly have absolutely no idea how to treat people. I have effing bent over backwards for you. Now you want to act like this with some free will decision? You have threatened me from the word go. If I didn't do and give you what you wanted, you would ruin me. I made a deal with you, and you changed the terms at every turn. We will deal with this tomorrow. It's Matthew Farwell to his once teenage girlfriend. And then in December of 2020 and January of 2021, 3 separate witnesses report escalating physical violence by Matthew Farwell towards Sandra Birchmore. In a text on December 29th, Sandra alludes to one incident. Birchmore says this, it made me really uncomfortable and stressed out and scared when you were next to me because I thought you were going to hit me after you said what you said and took things out of my hand. That's why I was crying. I know you wouldn't, but still it scared me. On January 20th, a friend of Birchmore's called the Stoughton Police Department and outed both of them. The friend revealed the 8-year relationship, the secret relationship between Detective Matthew Farwell and a young Sandra. And Farwell doesn't take it so well. And the reason I know that is because he texted this to Sandra. Here we go. Dude, your effing friend called my job. Sandra, WTF. You know what that means. What the F? Birchmore says, question mark? Farwell says, your friend just called my effing work to complain about me. WTF. Birchmore says, IDK, I don't know. Farwell says, what do you mean you don't know? Birchmore says, I literally just woke up. Detective Farwell says, did you steal from her? Birchmore says, nope. Farwell says, what is going on? You also told me that no one knew about us, yet she claimed we are effing. Birchmore says, it's literally nothing. Farwell says, it's not nothing. She called my job. That's insane. And Farwell continues, why would she call and drop my effing name, Sandra? Like, what do I have to do with you not giving her something? Like, you have no idea how bad what she did is. I literally can't believe this is even real life, he says. Like, what else do I have to worry about now? Which other friend will do something tomorrow? 2 days before her death, Birchmore and Farwell text about the birth of their child. Still months and months away, and what name they might give the baby. And then on February 1st, at exactly 9:08 p.m., Detective Farwell texts Sandra with a question. He wants to know if he can, quote, come by for a second. Presumably that's him right there, coming by for a second. She tells him the door will be open, and that was the very last text she ever sent. If you are not mad or angry enough now, wait until you hear about the day Sandra referred to as, quote, the best day of her life. The legal system has another name for it. It's called statutory rape. Sandra writes, I'm glad that you agreed to take my virginity, though. And Farwell answers, me too. And then Farwell says something else that police say seals their case. Pour yourself a really stiff drink, because I'm reading the rest in a moment. And I'm going to ask the question, are these revolting texts enough to prove murder? Answers next. In April of 2013, Sandra Birchmore was 15. She was a student in a youth program at her local police department. Her young life would take a major turn that month, and not for the better. By her own recollection, that was when she and Matthew Farwell, a 27-year-old married cop and mentor, had sex for the first time. She was a minor, and that grown-up detective took her virginity. Here's how they discussed it over text messages almost 7 years later in February of 2020. Sandra said this: "I had butterflies so bad the day you took my virginity." Detective Farwell said, "Me too. It was such a big day." Sandra: "Still know the date to this day." Farwell says, "Really?" Sandra says, "Yes." Farwell has smiley face emoji. Sandra says, "That is not a date I'll ever forget." Sandra says, "It was April 10th, 2013. Farwell does the smiley face. Sandra says, "Best day of my life," with a heart emoji. Farwell says, "Me too." Sandra says, "I'm glad you agreed to take my virginity, though." Farwell, "Me too." LOL, "If I pushed, I absolutely could have effed you without condoms from day one." Sandra says, "Probably if you really pushed it. I was kind of scared to say no in the beginning, not knowing how you'd take it. So yeah, you would have gotten no condoms, LOL." 1 year after that text conversation, but 8 years after their sexual relationship started, Sandra Birchmore was murdered, allegedly by that secret boyfriend, Detective Matthew Farwell. And that brings me to Sarah Azari, criminal trial attorney and NewsNation legal analyst. I mean, I need a shower, right? After reading that, Sarah, I need a shower. It's so disgusting. And I'm not so far off your average juror, so how damning is this stuff?
They are damning, Ashley, because look, a defense attorney is going to come in and say, okay, this was just some dirty fantasy. Maybe it was even sex with a minor, but he's charged with murdering a victim of a crime. And that's why these text messages are damning and relevant, because you've got two layers of crime here. The prosecution is saying a crime occurred, which was the child abuse, child molestation, and therefore there's a victim of crime, which is the deceased Sandra, and then he murdered that victim. So you need both of the sets of conduct. You need the motive to murder, and you need the crime itself, which is the child molestation. And so I think they're really important, Ashley, especially the text messages that are with third parties about his violence, about how he turned on her when she became pregnant and she started making demands about the birth of her child, and he just wasn't having it. It was not the same anymore. And so you really have a strong motive in these text messages of why he would want her dead.
So again, the whole story of their text messaging is long and illustrious, and it's painful to read it. I am going to read one more clip because, again, this is what jurors are going to hear, presumably, right? Unless there's some deal. Farwell says, "What was the first day you said, 'OMG, I want this guy to be my first. I want to feel him inside me'?" And Sandra answers, "Yeah, so 2012, I finally decided that I was going to try and find a way to F you and just wasn't sure how. How did you feel when I asked to make your dream come true?" Farwell answers, "Amazing." And Sandra says, "Good." Farwell says, "I absolutely would have F'd you in 12. Sandra says, 12? He says 2012. So, I already asked you, how do you get over the fact that the jury is just going to despise him, right? They're just going to despise him and want him to go down for something. Mm-hmm. But won't they be also wondering why no stat rape charge? Like, she was 14 and 15 in ninth grade that year. And won't the jury be saying, I don't get it. Why is this murder? Where's the statutory rape charges?
Well, the murder is the bigger charge. And so the jury will have to decide that a crime occurred, which is the statutory rape. He's not being charged with that crime. But in order to get to murdering the victim of a crime, you need to find that he was guilty of a crime or he committed a crime. And that's where all of this matters. And you know what, Ashley? The other thing that stood out to me is that he not only was so specific about what they had done. It wasn't just this sort of hypothetical conversation about sex acts. It was like, recitation of facts that actually occurred. but also the fact that it's clear from those text messages that he wanted her because of her age. That there was this, there was this attraction, or the sexual attraction
was disgusting.
It's disgusting. So there is statutory rape, and she is the victim of that statutory rape, which makes this a victim of a murder. And again, a lot of motive here.
I'm out of time, but I just wanted to read this. In February, Farwell describes pinning Birchmore down during sex and asking her, "Will you say, Matt, stop, I'm 13, I'm not ready for this. OMFG, please stop." Like he wants to fantasize about this. And then the FBI investigator said he'd reviewed a lot of other texts where Farwell had instructed Birchmore to act as though her brother were coming in to have sex with her. I mean, just it's all so vile.
Yeah. And one more thing, I think the text also established that there's a propensity for violence, because, this was like references to violent sex. Good point. So I think, that also goes into the whole strangulation issue, the cause of death.
I can't wait for this trial, if there's going to be one. You'll be there by my side, I hope. Sarah Azari, thank you.
Yes, of course. Good to see you.
You too. Coming up. She can't live with him. But
thanks.
Certainly doesn't want to go to trial without him. Sarah Boone fired or drove away no fewer than 8 free attorneys after being charged with killing her boyfriend using a suitcase to suffocate him. But rather than represent herself, she drew up a want ad. Inmate seeks attorney. Looking for a prosperous challenge? Invest in the oppressed. Believe. And guess what? It worked. Sarah Boone's 9th and maybe last defense attorney has signed on, and he's with me next. Bad news tonight for the so-called suitcase murder suspect, Sarah Boone. As of last Friday, she again has a bona fide attorney by her side. So she no longer has to represent herself in court during her murder trial. A 9th lawyer has now agreed to take her case after the 8 previous either quit or were fired. But boy, does this 9th one have his work cut out for him. Her trial is due to get underway next month. That's 33 days to be exact. And the judge is refusing to delay it any longer to help the new lawyer prepare. Boone's been jailed for 4.5 years now, charged with murdering Jose Torres, her boyfriend. The police say she zipped him up in a suitcase and then ignored his pleas for help as he suffocated. And she recorded the whole thing. Take a look.
Sarah. You. Sarah. Sarah.
Stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
Sarah Boone says it was all an accident, apparently. She says they were playing a game and then she just forgot that he was in the suitcase when she went up to bed. Well, that's not good, because when Boone realized that representing herself was going to be too hard, she decided that she would draft a want ad and then send it to the judge. And that made it on TV. And here's what it said. Inmate seeks attorney, looking for a prosperous challenge, ready for your close-up on national television. Are you zealous with a side of keen? Show the world who you are with your original creativity, extraordinary expertise, confident ingenuity. And lucky for Sarah, it worked. It caught the attention of James Owens, who is tonight Sarah Boone's 9th attorney and happens to be my live guest. Mr. Owens, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you, ma'am, for having me.
So I guess the big question is, why did you decide when you saw or heard about this want ad to jump to her defense?
Well, I've been following the case. It's been pending for a long time, 4 years. And, I watch a lot of true crime on YouTube. And so I kept following it and seeing how lawyers were getting out of the case or withdrawing. So I was just curious to see it come to an end. And then the judge made a decision fairly recently, I think in June, that she had forfeited her right to court-appointed counsel. And so she was going to have to represent herself. And, of course, that's a concern for many lawyers, knowing that it's very difficult to get a fair trial, especially in a more serious case like this, a murder trial, representing yourself. I mean, it's foolish. So there was really a gap in the system. This is a rare event where you go through 8 lawyers and the judge finds that you don't qualify for a court-appointed lawyer. So because of that, I felt like somebody in the private sector should step up. She sent out the ad. I saw it on YouTube. I didn't respond immediately. I waited 3 or 4 weeks to see if one of the local Orlando criminal defense lawyers would pick up the case, and it didn't happen. So I got involved.
So that's you. You're number 9. You met with her for 4 hours. Did you get any inkling of why 8 others are in her rearview mirror?
Well, it's a difficult case. It's a complex case. It's not going to be an easy case to try. There is some strong evidence that the state would be presenting in the form of videotape and the audio tape, obviously. So there are some complex issues. It's not, Sarah is a unique person, as you may know, and, she may not get along with everybody. Maybe personalities clash or lock horns. She and I happen to get along really well. And I like her, she likes me, so I can't really speak to them. There are several reasons that people have conflicts. Sometimes you represent, as a lawyer, a state witness in the past. You obviously can't stay on the case. So there were several reasons that several of the lawyers didn't stay on for very long and got off the case.
I've got just a couple seconds left, literally, but I just have to ask, did you reach out to prosecutors for a plea bargain? Did you talk with Sarah about a plea bargain? Did either of them refuse? And again, I've got about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, while I was on the way up to see her, before I'd even talked to her, I reached out to the prosecutor just to see, what their posture was on the case. So that happens with any case. You want to know where the state is.
Was it no?
Well, it was not resolved in any way by plea.
Yeah.
Okay. There was no way.
Yeah, I would love to have you back. By the way, just real quickly, yes or no, did Sarah say yes or no to a plea deal?
No, she said no.
She said no. All right. Hey, James Owens, I want to have you back. I'm still fascinated. This has been a bit of a breaking news night, so we're short on time, but I hope you'll come back on the program. Thanks for doing this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned. My colleague, Chris Cuomo, is next.